Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. My name is Henry Timms. I'm the director of the Charles Simon Centre here at the 92nd Street Y. A very warm welcome to a very special evening. Tonight is the first in a series called In Residence at the 92nd Street Y, where we have reached out to the truly most fascinating organisations of our times and invite them to bring the people, the passions and the ideas that drive them to the stage of the 92nd Street Y. There is no better organisation to start this series with than the Huffington Post. There is no better time to have the Huffington Post here than this evening. The Huffington Post has revolutionised online news, entertainment, media and more. This evening we have a stellar panel to really look behind the news, to look to the year ahead. We have a second instalment coming up where we'll bring together some of the editors of the Huffington Post to look at the business they do, to look at the extraordinary success that they've built. Forgive me three pieces of administration before we begin. Firstly, handed out this evening will be cards. On the cards, you are welcome to write down your email addresses so we can keep you in touch with what is coming up here at the Y. You can also put down questions for what's going on this evening. As an incentive for you submitting your email addresses this evening, we will be giving one signed copy of the new Huffington Post book, How to Blog, to a lucky winner this evening. I'd also like to point you towards Erica Jong's new book, who will be on the panel this evening. She'll be signing copies of her new book of poetry, Love Comes First, afterwards this evening. I'd also point you towards Robert Rubin's event on Tuesday evening, which we have some tickets left. It really is a truly stellar panel. I've been briefed very firmly backstage to keep introductions short, so I will allow Arianna Huffington to bring on her own panel, only to say this. She's the co-founder and editor of the Huffington Post, the renowned author of 12 books, named to the Time 100 Power List, truly one of the finest people we've had the good chance to know here at the 92nd Street Y. Let me introduce, to look at the year ahead, Arianna Huffington and her panel.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here tonight. This is our first evening in partnership between the Huffington Post and the 92nd Street Y. And I'm delighted to be here with some of my favorite Huffington Post bloggers. And just very quickly, I'm going to go around and introduce them. Craig Newmark, of course, is the man who has single-handedly destroyed American newspapers. And he's making up for it now by doing an enormous amount to encourage people to be of service, and he'll tell us more about that. Nora has, of course, been one of the most celebrated Huffington Post bloggers after a lot of cajoling on my part. And she has a new movie coming out called Julie and Julia, and I hope she'll tell us something about that. Erica Jong and I met many, many years ago on a rainy day in England.
Manchester,
England. And she had just written Fear of Flying. Now she has her 8th book coming out in February, just in time for Valentine's Day, a collection of poems.
7th book of poems, 21st book.
Yeah, it's 7th
God
book of
help
poems.
Me. Yes.
Oh, God. And it's going to be called Love Comes First. And Paul single-handedly has done more for the veterans of the Iraq and Afghanistan war than anyone else. It's really remarkable what you've done with an organization that now counts over 100,000 people as members. And we'll discuss that in the context of what the new administration is planning to do for vets. Trey Ellis has mastered every medium of writing, from novels and plays and screenplays to blogging. So thank you all for being here. And what a great day to be here, the first full day of the Obama era. So let me go around and ask everyone, how did it feel yesterday to hear the speech, to watch him being sworn as the 44th President of the United States? Where were you? What did you feel? What did you think?
I was lucky enough to get to Washington for the inauguration. It felt great, and then my reaction is, what's next? What do we do? because it's going to be tough. Expectations have been set pretty high, and I figure we all need to do something to help meet those expectations.
Well, I was working, and I didn't see the speech till I got home and read all the reviews of it and saw all the clips of it and saw people being kind of mingy about it, I thought. And then I saw the speech at about 10 o'clock last night and thought it was great. So there it was. Erica, you should have read the poem. I have to say that. Well, I mean, one of yours.
Yes. It was not a strong poem, but thank you. But I watched it from home on TV, and I was enormously moved by Obama's speech. I don't think the man has put a foot wrong since he was elected. I don't think he put a foot wrong in the campaign, and I'm even including Rick Warren, the purpose-driven life. I think he's shown a great seriousness. I think he's extremely smart and thoughtful. And I also think he has an ESP about the way to bring people together by showing a very broad-ranging cabinet, a broad-ranging inaugural team. I think he's extraordinary. And I say this as someone who blogged madly for Hillary Clinton, but was convinced by my daughter, who's now 30, that Obama was better. I began to study Obama, and indeed I think he's absolutely a thoughtful, a very clever, a very forceful man, and the right man for this country at this time, the right president.
Well, I was a part of what will probably go down as the Purple Gate experience. I was a purple ticket holder and was locked out with about maybe 5,000 other people just as the speech was starting. And as frustrating and aggravating as that was, I think it was a sign of why yesterday was so special. You had thousands of people who literally had their experience crushed before their eyes. The gates closed 10 feet in front of us, just as he was taking the stage. But everybody got along. There were no riots, there were no arrests, there was no violence. Everybody took care of each other. Even little old ladies that were getting squished, people would push them out and everybody said, relax, relax. And then of course there were chants of, let us in, let us in. and even just chants of purple, purple. Just random. But at the end, everybody took care of each other. And I think that's really what yesterday was all about. And it inspired me, because when I came home from Iraq in 2004, we were a country so divided. And the atmosphere was so poisoned. And it's really changed so much, and I'm very optimistic about the future.
And why were you locked out?
I have no idea. There were no cops to tell us. There were no speakers. There was no information. I guess they just reached their limit, and they had, I guess, underestimated the number of people coming. I don't know. I dealt with that in Iraq, too, so
Did
it's
they
kind of
open
familiar.
the gates?
We at the Huffington Post are going to make a point of finding out where you were locked out.
Could I ask a question? What did you have to do to get a purple ticket? I mean, were there people who had given money to and thought?
There were some people who had lined up there at 4 in the morning. Some people had paid thousands of dollars. Other people who were congressional staffers. We got 2 tickets for me and another veteran through a congressional office that we worked with. I mean, the only scene similar was Arianna's party, I think, a couple of days before. I never knew Arianna had so many friends. But.
Well, I just think it's a great time to be a skinny, middle-aged black man. But I was there with my kids. Ava's 10 and Chet is 7, and we were at the very back at the Washington Monument with just the cheap seats. Even on the jumbotron, was far away, but it's an amazing, unforgettable time. Took him out of school, braved the crowds. I've never been around so many people that were all in such good spirits. There was a barricade to get out at the end, and then people were just lifting. There's a woman in a wheelchair. We lifted her up over this barricade. Just everyone was together in a way that I've never seen. Ever.
I was there with my 19-year-old daughter, who is a freshman in college, and she was really completely awed by the moment and the sense of history. And what was interesting for me was the contrast between the sense of celebration and exhilaration in the audience and the sober mood of his speech. His speech was a real sort of reality check from the first sentence. And it was almost like a sermon to America to grow up. And the key moment for me was when he said it's time, quoting the scriptures, it's time to let go of childish things. And that was really the essence of the speech, again and again repeated in many ways. So that's something which I've observed with Obama many times, including during his victory night. You know, his speech doesn't in a way give the audience exactly what they want, doesn't do the rah, rah, rah. He basically wants them to know that these are serious times, that as he said, there are gathering clouds and raging storms, and that if we don't all come together and do something about it, it's not going to be good. But if we do, we are going to prevail. And that's been the consistent message, and it was the message yesterday, too.
He's also shown us how important leadership is, even leadership in how to behave toward each other, in that he believes that we should be able to disagree without being disagreeable. And he shows the way. And having had a vacuum of leadership for 8 years, it's all the more refreshing.
Now, is this going to last, Nora? What do you think? This bipartisan kumbaya?
Well, I don't know. You know, we always have no imagination at all about things like whether it's going to rain even. So I don't know. I was thinking about it a lot because I think that this cable cycle that we lived through in this kind of giddy way during the election, you know, I mean, I think we watched Hardball at 5 and 7 every night.
Exactly.
But I noticed, like, when the Blagojevich thing happened, I'm so excited I can say his name. And it was so exciting in the middle of the Bernie Madoff thing to have someone bad come along with the actual syllable goy in his name.
Exactly.
But I was very irritated at the you know, the 5 days of attempting to pretend that maybe Rahm Emanuel wasn't there some, you know, trying somehow to do the cable thing and make some connection to Obama with this lunatic who's the governor of Illinois. And I thought, you know, I think that, unfortunately, because we're in that kind of thing, every single tiny misstep is now going to be so overblown. So I don't know. I'm very interested to see how this cable thing matches with this mood in the country, which is that everybody wants things to get better.
You're absolutely right that the 24-hour news cycle is really destructive of our political life. And it means that, I mean, people have been talking about the Supreme Court justice flubbing the oath of office and saying, Obama's not really president because the oath of office was flubbed, which is absurd. I mean, Obama became president at noon of Inauguration Day, whether or not the oath of office was flubbed. But there's such a need to fill the maw of cable news that they'll seize on anything.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know how much it matters because, you know, we pay attention to the news and what they talk about in detail in this way, but again, and we'll pay some attention to it, and then it doesn't really matter in our lives. What matters, and what I've observed in 14 years of customer service, because that's how I make a living at my website, I see that people overall have always wanted to give each other a break just to do the right thing for other people. You know, when I've heard people distinguish small town values versus big city values, that's a scam, because big cities are sets of neighborhoods, small towns, and everywhere people generally want to give folks a break. So, and I think people have been hungry to be led by someone who believes in giving others a break and by treating people like they want to be treated. So I think we're on the precipice of a time where people will feel good about each other.
But Craig,
people
what will
give
we
each other
do
a
about
break.
our snarky press?
Well,
And the desire to be snarky. I'm appalled sometimes by the comments that my blogs get on the HuffPo. I mean,
Yeah, we all get those.
Yeah,
You should let me know about that because we have 30 moderators who are supposed to stop any comments that appall you. I mean, you're supposed
but
to
they're
have
so
comments,
trivial. I mean,
but they're not ad hominem attacks.
Some of them are.
Yeah.
And it's better since you mediate them.
yeah. That's
But people are so desirous of being snarky and
Yes,
pulling each other down.
But let's be honest, we have had 8 years of being snarky. And the truth is, you know, it's that thing Nixon said, you're not going to have Richard Nixon to kick around anymore. Unfortunately, he was then back 4 years later.
Right.
But we have had quite a lot of fun at the expense of Bush and Cheney, although now his name seems to be pronounced Cheney. Have you noticed this?
You've been watching too much
I don't
Chris
know when that
Matthews.
happened. But anyway,
I loved seeing him in a
no,
wheelchair.
but
Loved it.
He's even more like Dr. Strangelove then.
Even more like.
But
Strange.
actually, you know, Craig, you wrote in your blog post yesterday that we may be entering the new age of niceness.
That was actually, that was within the last 24 hours. Maybe I'm seeing what I want to be seeing, but people were a hell of a lot nicer to each other. I mean, I was somewhat traumatized by being hugged by two, what I'm calling Valkyries of niceness at the commencement of the oath. But again, I remember, I do the kind of forums moderation which Erica was talking about. I'm part of the customer service team where I work, but I probably do more forums, discussion board moderation than anyone. I get rid of a lot of what we call trolling, and yet there aren't that many trolls out there. People do want to get along. It's just that some people want attention, and they'll say ugly things to get that attention. But again, so I blog this thing, and I'm very excited about what we're seeing. I'm excited about an AP report which confirms my perception of niceness, poll which says people really want to make this work.
So the question, Paul, is you're dealing with some real issues that are affecting the lives of vets and their families very profoundly. And there are opponents of the kind of changes that you want to see. How do you see that bipartisanship, that spirit that we've described here, surviving in the middle of what's going to be a big debate coming up?
Well, I think what we've shown in the military community is that it's necessary at times for survival. You've got to take care of each other. You've got to have that sense of community and unity. And when we were in Iraq, there were no Republicans or Democrats. And you hear that a lot, but there really weren't. We worked together on a mission, whatever that mission was, but we were working together, focused on one task. And I think that there are some lessons to be learned from that unity that develops within the military, and you're seeing it already. And I think for veterans issues, this can be a unifying issue. There were only a few opponents to the GI Bill. Unfortunately, the past president was one of them. But everyone else seemed to get behind the idea of educating veterans, investing in them, and giving them economic opportunity. And I think that this could be an issue for us to build on. But there's one other thing that I think Obama is very smart in doing that we kind of really didn't address. He's also going around the media. He's kind of cutting out the middleman the same way Craig did. And he's also taking it from kind of a customer service approach. I don't know if he'd call himself the customer service guy, but I think Obama's trying to create a sense of community, a sense of receptiveness. And what we've seen in our online organizing is that the community does regulate itself. And we saw that yesterday. When a guy tried to climb the fence, everybody said, hey man, don't climb the fence, you're going to screw it up for the rest of us. And everybody kind of settled down. And I think you see that sense of the community regulating itself more and more.
Michelle Obama has vowed to make military families her priority. So that says a lot for your point of view.
It does. I mean, we're very optimistic. Yesterday, 2 days ago, she spent some time doing a care package event. President Obama was at Walter Reed earlier this week. The Commander-in-Chief ball was a place he spent a lot of time last night. So there's going to be a focus there. And I think there is some bridge building to be done, especially because the Democrats don't have a great reputation within the military. We know there's a lasting kind of overlap from Clinton's move on Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and his reputation as a draft dodger. I think he's got an opportunity to build some significant bridges early, and I think Michelle Obama is going to be a critical part of that.
So Trey, we move from politics to culture. There have been some incredible teachable moments already. My favorite has been the first granny moving into the White House.
Right.
And it was partly because I'm Greek and my mother, the Greek Yaya, lived with me and helped me bring up my daughters. So I kind of loved it yesterday when it was the grandmother who appeared with the children at the swearing in, and she's moved in, and it's an amazing moment because in America the tendency has been to put the grandparents in old people's homes and have them play Scrabble and wait for the Hallmark card, 2-3 times a year, while the parents struggle to find childcare. So this is kind of the ultimate bringing together supply and demand, Craig, right? What are your favorite teachable moments culturally?
Well, culturally, I think if you look at Obama's especially in the black community, of the sense of the black nerd, the rise of the black nerd.
Now we're talking.
Is a really important thing. Because you think before, in the world of hip-hop, let's say you're in school and they'd say, oh, you're acting white because you're the smartest kid in class. There are kids that would not answer a question because they're afraid of ridicule from their class. And that's not going to happen anymore. There's no way that kid is going to be quiet knowing that he can be the person
That's true. I like the way Michelle and Barack are with each other. I like the fact, if you want to call this a teachable moment, they look into each other's eyes. They obviously are bonded sexually, intellectually through their kids. You see a role model of a marriage of two people who respect and like and lust for each other. I sort of feel sorry for them that they're going to have very little time alone in the next 4 years. But there's something wonderful about a married couple who actually talk to each other. What a great role model for America.
That's what people said about that fist bump, that first fist bump. People said, after that, they felt like they would fist bump and then they're like, tonight we celebrate. Like after we get home, we're going to celebrate.
But they are. I mean, we need some role models for marriages that work.
Absolutely.
Do you have any?
I don't think this is a very teachable moment, but I do think that many children are going to be told to make their own beds, because those girls have to do it in the White House, and I think actually it made me sad I didn't still have small children, so I could take it all back and start over again.
Exactly.
Just speaking as someone who literally grew up with a plastic pocket protector and thick black glasses taped together, from my point of view, what was teachable is the way that a lot of the folks, let's say at the Federal Webmasters Council, are now emerging from the darkness. They've even maybe prematurely started talking about how they can better serve the public through their websites. And it's almost like they feel like the darkness is lifted and they can do their job now and tell the truth. And I'll only add for Trey's benefit what I added for them recently in Washington, live long and prosper.
Well, of course, the big teachable moment has to do with service, and Craig and I have been talking about what the administration is planning to do, because Craig has been involved with them in what is known informally as the creation of a kind of Craigslist for service. So I'd love you to sort of bring us up to date on what's been happening to the extent that you can talk about it.
Yeah. I'm on the periphery of this kind of thing. Months ago, maybe a year ago, I saw this metaphor in the Obama platform called a Craigslist for service. Started thinking about what it might mean kind of recently and blogged it in HuffPost. basically thinking, again, very down-to-earth way, what does it mean how people can help each other out in kind of in a hurry? Because you could serve everyone, let's say in your full-time life. You could join the military or the Peace Corps. You could be a teacher or a cop. Of course, if for most of us, you may want to just do something part-time, like through a volunteer match. Or if you don't have the time but have some cash, there are ways on the internet where you can pool money together, let's say through Donors Choose, which funds teachers' projects, Kiva, which is about microfinance, and so on. So people are beginning to help each out in different ways. Although remember that, again, if you're, let's say, a single parent putting kids through school, you may not have that time or money to do that. But what I think, what I want to see in the country is this kind of idea that some form of service, if doable for you, is kind of expected. Now it turns out that there are folks at different, let's say, social networking companies, people in traditional service organizations who are now beginning to figure out how do you work together to make this happen online. Stuff's happening. There are folks at Google involved. There are folks like me kind of peripherally working with some folks at the Web House. Well, maybe that's not a bad time. But there are folks who are genuinely working together to make something happen. I honestly don't know how much I should be saying at this point, so I'll behave myself. But again, you do want to help, you want to serve, and also there's a kind of meta service where you help out people who have served, sometimes risking their lives. For example, I'd recommend an organization, everyone, called Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, IAVA.org, which seems to be doing pretty well. I don't know about their executive director too much, but I do recommend the group.
I'm having my own ya-ya moment because I've turned into the zipless gran, as my friend Ken Follett calls me. So what I basically am doing is spending a lot of time with Molly's 3 children. And I was raised by grandparents in an extended European-style family like yours. And I think grandparents are terribly, terribly important. So I'm trying to give service by giving as much time to my daughter's kids as I can.
I think there was something that I missed in the speech yesterday was that Peace Corps moment that you got in the Kennedy speech, which I'm afraid I remember. And, you know, some kind of bundle of ideas that maybe had to do with college tuition paired with community service, some kind of, you know, just some good, something that would be this thing that thousands of kids who heard that speech would say, I want to do that, the way they did with the Peace Corps.
Or Teach for America or something.
But I think he is doing that. I mean,
I know, I just missed it in the, I think he wants to, I think he would think it was a perfectly good idea. I'm just saying that it was one of the things I missed in the speech.
Yeah, I think he pretty much, I feel like he's been consistently hitting that message. I think the only way he could have rammed it home was to put the URL in the speech and say, go to change.gov. But I think the entire day before was about that sense of service. And I think what he's shown us is it's not just doing one thing, it's about creating a lifetime of service and a culture of service. And one of the teachable moments that I see consistently is that he's leading by example. He's out in front, he's painting walls, and he's also keeping his promises. You know, he said he was going to bring the Joint Chiefs together today. He got elected. He did that today. He said he was going to close down Guantanamo. He started to do that today. So I think he's keeping true to his promises. And you know, integrity is part of integrity is doing the right thing even when no one's looking.
Exactly.
And I think that's what I'm starting to see. And I think, you know, I'm consistently impressed by the energy of the young people. And, you know, I'm 34, so I'm not considered young anymore, I guess. But but you see teenagers who are volunteering on our website, going to other nonprofits, who are getting involved, and it's really inspiring. And I saw that in my grandfather's generation. I, too, was raised by my grandparents. And as a World War II veteran, he taught me about service. And that was expected of everyone. in that generation. And I think we're starting to build that sort of culture again and creating another great generation, the greatest generation again.
Yeah, I've been making a similar point because, frankly, I could use my baby boomer butt bailed out by the kids, and I think that's the spirit I see. Again, maybe I'm seeing what I want to see, but something is different. Something is happening. And
what seems to me to be different is that this is like serious for him. It's not the way that every president talks about service and creates some form of supporting and facilitating people's efforts to serve, but it remains something marginal, sort of disconnected from governing. He wants to make it part of governing. There's going to be this executive order creating an Office of Social Innovation within the White House that's going to actually work all the time around this. And Jim Messina, who is the Deputy Chief of Staff, is really passionate about the subject. And you just need somebody on the team who is actually going to drive this. And I just feel it's incredibly important because times are going to get tougher. And the one thing people are going to have more of is time. We're going to have less money, fewer jobs, but more time. So how that time is used is going to be crucial in terms of whether we increase dysfunctions or whether we actually use that time to come together more. So moving from service and all the goods that are happening to how bad the economy is, I have found in my experience that there's a direct correlation between how much the person I'm talking to knows about economics and how pessimistic they are. Like the less they know, the more they think, oh, okay, this is going to be over, we must have hit bottom. The more they know, they say, oh, it's going to take 5 years. Unemployment is going to hit double digits. So I don't know where you are on the spectrum of pessimism about the economy, but Trey, let's start with you.
Well, it is a big, he's, the new captain of this ship, and we don't know yet if the ship is going to be the Poseidon or the Mayflower. I think that's what we're kind of waiting for. I think the difference is, and going back to a little bit of Bush bashing, because it's so fun, is I really think when he was elected, it was like he could show his dad, I think he wanted to be instantly the ex-president that he is now, golfing with a hat, and saying, I used to be president, and tell stories about when I was with Putin and hanging out. And in times of peace, it was okay to have a politics of a theatrical politics, where we really were talking about haircuts and just nonsense all the time, because the government itself just kind of puttered along, and then everything fell apart. So now we have a time where people have to say, we have to get things done. I was really impressed talking about the economy with Geithner's. People didn't say, look, we're not going to just kick him out of it and not confirm him because of some peccadillos he's had personally. Because you think, he might have made some personal mistakes, but if he could really turn around the entire economy, then God bless him and, forgive his discretions for his, not underpaying his maids or whatever he was doing.
I think we also have to talk about euphemism. For the last 2 years, people have been saying recession, not depression. And anybody who's read Galbraith's wonderful book about the crash of '29, which is still relevant, knows that we're much closer to the big D than the little r. And the news media don't even look at it. We have banks failing. We have banks refusing to give credit. We have brokerage houses collapsing. And in fact, if you think about Obama's hegira, he became stronger as a candidate when Lehman Brothers folded. His candidacy became more serious after this long, drawn-out Potemkin presidency where Bush would stand in front of a sign saying, clear skies, and basically cut all the regulation of pollution. Or he would go down to Hurricane Katrina. And again, it was a Potemkin village. There were no lights in the city of New Orleans, but he had plenty of lights for his news conference. I mean, we've seen so much of that in 8 years that it's truly a breath of fresh air to see a serious person addressing things seriously. But the media has not caught up to him.
And also somebody who's not bullshitting us.
Totally.
We've got a president who actually leveled with us yesterday and said things are not going to turn around and you're not all going to find rainbows in your front yard when you get home. And
Exactly.
coming from a president who thought when we got to Iraq everyone was going to come out and kiss us and hand us puppies. I mean, it's nice to see somebody level with you, and it's nice to see from a military standpoint. Again, it's nice to see somebody asking everyone else to serve, because we feel like we're the only ones who've been serving. You've got folks going back for a 4th, 5th tour to Iraq, and everyone else seems to be watching American Idol. So it was good to see everyone else join the fight. And with regard to the economy, well, it's so bad that the Army and Marine Corps are having no trouble recruiting anymore. For the first time since 2004, we're in the middle of 2 wars, and they hit their recruiting numbers last month. And in our world, we're seeing unemployment rates for young veterans that are about 3 times the national average. Foreclosure rates around military bases are 5 to 6 times the national average. So everything that's hitting the average American is hitting the American veteran even harder. And I think each one of these things I think we're past the points of canaries in the coal mine. But for me, it really was so refreshing to see somebody just level with me and tell me it's not going to be easy. We're all in this together, and there's a long fight ahead that's going to require some sacrifice.
But I want to say that one of the things that concerns me is that the Wall Street culture persists. And, we've had many years when companies, in order to make their stock prices go up, fire people, and then their stock prices go up.
And they get bonuses for that.
Yes, and they all give themselves bonuses. And that is still happening. I mean, Pfizer just announced this week that they're cutting, I can't remember how many thousands of jobs, and my memory, I could be wrong, someone here will know, is that they pay a 7 or 8% dividend. And I want somebody in the Commerce Department or in the Treasury Department to deal with these companies the way, if a company were leaving New York, we would want Bloomberg to sit down and say, don't leave New York. I want someone to help them find ways to not fire people. I mean, and yesterday when Obama said, people who work in companies will have, should share jobs and so on. And someone afterwards said this was a plea to the unions. What about a plea to management about this?
Absolutely.
I mean, this is where I see so much of this greed persisting in spite of all of this. So that is a concern I have.
That's right, absolutely right.
I guess I'm a little more optimistic about the economy, seeing the hope that we're going to see a lot of spending on infrastructure. Roads and bridges, they need a fair amount of work. Subways, we need maybe more of that kind of public transportation that puts people to work, and it's always an investment in the country. There's also other measures. In the late 40s, one of the great spurs to economic development was the GI Bill of that time, and now we have a new GI Bill, which I think will matter. The idea is that there will be a lot of this serious, realistic spending proposed. There will be people who will seek to be obstructionist for the sake of obstruction in Washington. I have a feeling we're going to be called upon to get behind Obama with our words, with our emails, and so on, and that's going to be another call to service where we all are going to have to stand up.
If he builds a Second Avenue subway, he'll get 100% in Manhattan forever.
But if you look back to the Roosevelt administration and how hard it was for Roosevelt to get certain things passed because Republicans in Congress were just as ideological as they are now, and they cried socialism at many points, and the Depression lasted 10 years instead of 5 because they blocked so many things he wanted to do.
At the moment, that seems to not be happening, partly because Republicans are in complete disarray, and partly because the bailout so far has benefited disproportionately banks and Wall Street. And that is what stuns me. The way the media have spent so much more time covering Blagojevich than what's happening to the bailout. I mean, the fact that the American media...
Where did all that money go? It's so mystifying.
Well, there is actually a really good site that we are talking to kind of bring more of what they're doing into the Huffington Post, called bailoutsleuth.com. And they have literally every bank that has gotten money, how much they've gotten, what they're doing with it, Are they laying people off? Are they paying bonuses? It's really an incredible amount of work. It's all information in the public domain. And the mainstream media are not doing their job again.
They're
and
not,
having not done their job in the lead up to the war in Iraq and after the war, you would think that right now, when there is sort of a major economic crisis, there would be a real pressure from the public to do their job. And certainly we're going to try to do our part. But it's a major need at the moment, because without accountability, all those billions and trillions, I mean, have you noticed how trillion has become the new billion?
Right. And billion has become the new million. But I'm devoted to the Huffington Post, and I read on the Huffington Post that some of the companies that got big bailout dollars are putting their money in tax havens. Just read that the other day on HuffPost. So,
or they're buying back their own debt, and they're not making new loans. And that's what's really dispiriting. I think that so much of what's $300 billion already has gone out the window, and none of that, or very little of that, has gone to do what we didn't put strings attached. We had enough strings attached to that money, and that makes me a little worried about how to manage something as big as this restructuring. And also restructuring, if you're going to spend the money on infrastructure, we think of the WPA and those great, the TVA and things. So those are fantastic, but there are all these things, jobs for women that don't work in construction. So, like some kind of caregivers, nurses' aides, those kind of things. Where people need teachers' assistants. We need that kind of money spent then there, so working mothers can get some of that.
Absolutely.
No, but to address the media point, I think that there is, the market, I hate to use that term, but the market is kind of forcing the media to adapt. I mean, the Huffington Post is a great example. You filled a void. I mean, MSNBC's explosion, there was obviously a void, and people like Rachel Maddow filled it. And to see her rise, right? I mean, she's the only person having a year almost as good as Obama's. I mean, but you've seen these new people and these new vehicles for media rise, and I think the internet does offer you that variety and that ability to seek the media you want. And if the media is not giving you what you want, change the channel, go to a different URL, and find.
If only we could get rid of Chris Matthews.
Oh, I love Chris Matthews.
Oh well,
I do.
We'll have you two on Hardball tomorrow.
One thing I think the silver lining about the economic crisis now is that we didn't really address ever, except for John Edwards, poverty, real poverty, because the people didn't have a voice. But now that the middle class is poor, the government is forced to deal with it. So I think we're going to be forced to make some real changes for everybody.
So we have 10 minutes left before we go to you for your questions. So let's just move to some of the lighter aspects of what's coming up. Like fashion, style. What did you think of Michelle Obama's dress? You are allowed to be snarky. Or not.
Well, I like that she's not wearing black like all of us.
Well, has any First Lady ever worn black at the inaugural balls? I don't think so. No. Craig, I go to you. Craig's girlfriend is in fashion.
Oh, I'm sure the girlfriend would approve of the fashion involved, but I am hoping for a big comeback of the plastic pocket protector.
I love the dress. I thought the dress was amazing. I'll jump in. I'll be the guy who jumps in. I mean, I love the dress. When she came, I was at the Commander-in-Chief's ball. When she walked out with a white dress on, you heard everybody go, "Whoa!" I mean, it really made a statement. And he wore a white bow tie. I don't know if anybody's worn a white bow tie since JFK as a president. And I thought, it was maybe it was symbolic. I mean, it was cleansing. It was new. It was fresh. It was something different. And it had some style. And I thought it was cool.
Yeah, I mean, the sense of their style, I think of, Obama especially as dressing like a little bit of sort of James Coburn from the 60s, And I think that's because, the skinny guy but still wiry and can kick your butt, I think that's, it's just exciting to have someone who's real. Because you got to remember that politicians up until Obama's time, remember like Dan Quayle, they've worn 1960s-styled newscaster, hairdos. Everything was just a theater of like the 60s and 70s up until now, So it's just interesting to have people that are just sort of real.
And today he ended the Bush tradition of always wearing a jacket in the Oval Office.
Yeah.
and was there without a jacket.
Like he's going to
And
work.
he has not yet given up his BlackBerry. And for the first time, there's going to be a laptop in the Oval Office, although we have not been told whether it would be a PC or a Mac.
Do we know which one he is?
He's a Mac.
He's a Mac.
Well, we think so. All of us who are Mac people think so.
But I
right?
have a feeling that he may
Is this
want to
forum
have
sponsored by Mac?
No, I have a feeling that he may want to have a team of rivals on his desk, a Mac and a PC. There is all this excitement. Whenever in our style section on the Huffington Post, we put anything, a slideshow, a story about the Obamas, whether it is Malia's sunglasses or Michelle Obama's dresses or what they're going to do at the White House, how they're going to entertain, the traffic skyrockets. There seems to be an absolute obsession with everything related to the Obamas. Do you think that's healthy? Is it good? Is it inevitable?
Oh, let's just say it's show business, and that is one of the reasons why he's the president. He had it. He had that thing, and now we're having a little fun looking at those. I mean, you want to be superior to all of your pathetic feelings about, is that brocade or lace? You know. But it's fun. It's fun to have a little bit of that.
It was actually wool and lace together.
Yes, I found that out at the end of the day. But meanwhile, I was curious about it, much more curious than what the minister was going to say in the church. Boy, there's a lot, I have to say. It just always, even though I have always wanted to be First Lady, I realize you would have to listen to a lot of ministers, and
That's very dreary.
But if you had to listen to Reverend Lowry, that would be good, and Yellow will be mellow. That was fun, wasn't
yeah,
it?
that was really good. That was good, yes.
That was cool. But he's made D.C. cool again. He's made Washington cool again in a way that I've never seen. I've been working down there for 4 years, and leaving New York, every time I get on that train, I'm like, oh no, I'm going to a place with crappy music and bad clubs and bars that close early. I mean,
That probably
bringing
won't
Washington
change.
back. I think it will. I mean, I saw General Casey at your event talking to Ricky Schroeder. I mean, it was really weird. I mean, D.C. used to be Hollywood for ugly people. Now they've kind of combined. I mean, it's strange. It's really weird.
So it comes back to what, Nora, a couple of years ago, you had said that after all, the presidency comes down to casting.
I did say
Comes
that.
down to what?
Casting.
Casting.
Yes, we were having a very depressing dinner after the last election, trying to think of who could be president, who we could win with, whom, and we all went around the table, I remember, trying to analyze what had happened. And I said the thing I say about everything, because I see everything from the point of view of the movie business, which is that it's all about casting, and I do believe that. And I think Obama's a big star, and the biggest star wins. Yeah. And this is just a very trivial way of looking at it, but he had a million other great things beside that. But oh my God, those pictures of him with those teeth, I mean, he's fabulous. He is fabulous, and I love that he started out, and I remember Art talking about this because we all thought he's a little too cool. And we kept saying, is he too cool? Is he too cool? And then suddenly the whole world looked at him and said, he's so cool. It was just this great thing where everybody suddenly understood his rhythm and this thing he does with his hands, and they got used to it.
But one of the things that I came to love about him is how comfortable he seems to be in his own skin.
Yes.
And I'm not making a racial reference here. He's comfortable. He moves with comfort. Mm. And to see somebody like that, and he doesn't seem to be faking. Whereas you always felt that Bush was faking. He was pretending to be this hail fellow, well-met, brush-clearing, skull and bones person. And nothing added up with Bush.
Yeah,
Nothing. And you always believed that he choked on a pretzel because he was secretly drinking.
We are going to miss him.
No, psychologically, I think of Obama, somebody as growing up like me, we're almost the exact same age, but in mainly white neighborhoods. But he's didn't know he's being sort of neither fish nor fowl. He had to be a natural chameleon to all these different worlds. So I think I've known him since running for Senate, and you'd see like his voice, how it changed talking to a black community speech. Then he'd be in Southern Illinois, where he'd just sound like a country western singer or something. Like he just has this natural way of just being who he looks at the audience and he empathizes with them, and he gives them, which is an amazing. He's a great communicator, better communicator than Reagan was.
And he's somebody we can be proud of. I mean, it's nice to have a president we can be proud of.
Right.
That the world admires and that inspires other people. And when we go overseas now, we can be like, our president's cooler than your president.
We no longer have to pretend to be Canadian.
Yeah.
But you know what I kept thinking during the inauguration? I kept thinking, I wish Barack Obama's mother were alive to see him. What a funny thing to think.
No, it's true.
You just think, what would she? You wonder. Just such for your whole life working to get to this pinnacle of success and having some of those people. I'm sort of in the same situation, not knowing that about you. Mm-hmm. My parents died before I'd become a writer or anything. My dad just thought. He was telling my uncle. My uncle just told me a couple of days ago. He said, "My son just graduated Stanford and he's going to be a writer. Like he's going to be destitute, And he said, "No, don't worry." And he never saw the books come out or anything.
Well, those of us who believe in an afterlife have no problem with that. They're all watching from above, and they're all very happy. And that's kind of part of the other teachable moment for me. That the fact that he had this life, which you would have, if you're reading about it. Abandoned by the father, partially abandoned by the mother, brought up by the grandmother, half black, half white. You would think he would be entirely screwed up. And there he demonstrates every day that you can transcend circumstances, that you can transcend your childhood, that you don't have to be stopped by all the problems that we all in different ways have had in our lives. And that's another extraordinary.
And another example of possibly grandparents.
Yes.
Because if you see those pictures of him on his grandfather's shoulders, I mean, that was a loved child. He really was. And he was raised by, I was feeling sad his grandmother didn't see it because it's so recent.
Well, what's different about the guy is that he's a leader. Not many real leaders come along very often. That's what we're responding to. I think that may explain the celebrity thing as well. We need that right now. We need someone to coalesce around because that's how we can fix things.
Absolutely.
And just to give you one more minute before we go to the questions, and if you can please go to the aisles, there are microphones. And maybe we'll bring the lights up a little bit so we can see better. But while you're doing that, I think what you said, Craig, about him being a leader, more than a leader, he is for me a potentially transformational leader, because the transformational leaders in our history have had the ability both to change policy and to influence human character, which sounds incredibly grand. But if you look at FDR, he didn't just bring about the New Deal. He also brought about the phrase, the only thing you have to fear is fear itself, which is really appealing to us as human beings. And it's nothing to do with policy. It's using the bully pulpit to affect what we feel and how we act. Or Abraham Lincoln talking about the better angels of our nature. And you see, whenever he speaks, including yesterday, he does that. When he talked about the fact that we are where we are in our economy, not just because of the decisions of a few driven by greed, but because of the decisions of many, the collective decisions that avoided the hard choices. So again, this was really a question about character, about choices. It had nothing to do with politics. And he does that without being didactic. And The only concern I have, having kind of been brought up on studying ancient Greek politics, is that there was a man, a Greek leader called Aristides, who was constantly admired and lauded and extolled the way we've done about Obama today. And he was in fact called Aristides the Just. And at some point, the Athenians got so fed up with hearing about Aristides the Just that they exiled him. For no other reason than the fact that everybody else was praising him. So let's watch out for that. It's in our DNA too.
Absolutely.
So, who has the first question?
There are people out there.
Yes.
She can just shout it out.
You can shout it out.
Yeah.
Yes.
What makes a great leader are people willing to respond. FDR wasn't the great generation. The great generation was that whole vast numbers of people who were willing to get into the Army and get into the Navy and become a CCC member, become a WAC, or whatever it would take. And it's up to us to do that responding. And I think particularly when I listen to you talk about service, what if this generation was the generation that didn't say, what's your sign? What's your service?
Wow, I love that.
The kind of people that always thought in terms of what is it you do for pro bono work? What is it you do for your volunteer work? What if in movies, instead of Julia Roberts grabbing 33 cigarettes in an hour and a half, she instead picked up the phone and called for her volunteer job with an extra minute in the movie. So that it became part and parcel of what we do, what we see on TV, we see in the way we talk to each other. What is it you do for service? What is it you do for volunteer?
You actually should blog about that.
You
And
got my vote.
No, that's actually great. And send it to me, Arianna at HuffingtonPost.com, and we'll post it. Yes.
First, I have to gush, I just adore you. I wake up in the morning and I read, I go to bed and I check before time. What I love about it is it's constantly changing, whatever subject, including sex. You have a sex page. I think it's very...
Can you use the microphone? I mean, really, it would be much better if they would use the microphone.
But you don't need a microphone. Where are you?
Where are the microphones, actually? They are supposed to be...
Where are they?
They're at the
They're
end.
in the purple section.
But if you don't mind, actually, that would be great, because then everybody can hear. So if you don't mind lining up, it won't be long.
Oh, there.
Great. Great, thank you. Is it?
It's not on. That's funny.
Let's see. Can we
hear
get
you.
the
We'll repeat
microphones
the
on?
question.
Sound people backstage are working to put them on.
It's actually not a question, it's just to extend on what you're saying. Somebody said something interesting recently, that it's not your IQ, but it's your EQ that actually makes people successful. And it's the emotional quotient. Do you have anything to add on that? Because I do think that there are people out there that have an ability to be comfortable in their own skin, like Barack Obama. And I really think it is your, because there's a lot of people out there who have tremendous intelligence, but you wouldn't want to be in a room with them.
Mm-hmm.
So. Thank you. Erica? Yeah.
Well, I, for one, am very relieved that we have a super smart president who knows history and who doesn't believe the United States is the United States of amnesia, as Gore Vidal calls us. I don't agree with this speaker. I believe that intelligence matters a lot and that reading books matters a lot. And one of the things that we haven't discussed is that Barack Obama came to our attention as a writer of memoir, a very honest writer of memoir who dealt with some very difficult issues in life, which is to have a father who decamped, to be partly white, partly black, to have traveled to Indonesia and been in school there, to have been in Hawaii where his grandparents lived, and who had a very broad view of the world as a patchwork quilt of races and religions. I think his intelligence matters a great deal, and I think his command of language matters a great deal.
Yeah, but not just that. I think you're touching on something important. His ability to connect to people, his ability to empathize, I think is incredibly important. I mean, Bush always talked about his physical fitness. I mean, I don't care if our president's 400 pounds, as long as he can find Uganda on a map. I hope he speaks 6 languages. I mean, I think we've got a guy who can do it all. And I hope he continues to be able to do that. But I think there's something magical, and I've seen it in action. I've seen him with people, and anybody, I think you've seen him, even whether it's the cab driver, the guy working behind the counter, or a world leader. He does have that ability to immediately make you feel like he understands where you're coming from.
Yeah. He really likes
you don't meet a lot of politicians in Washington who understand that piece.
And thank you, because that's what I actually meant. I think it's the combination of the two.
Yeah.
I think, you could be a very smart person but not connect.
There are people waiting. Thank you
I will.
so much. And if we can try and keep the questions short. Hi, Barbara.
Hi, Arianna. I'd like to talk a little bit about New York, if I could. First of all, I'd like to know what you guys think about Hillary leaving the Senate and going on to Secretary of State. And I learned today that Caroline Kennedy has opted out of her Senate bid. And so she cited personal reasons and Ted Kennedy's health as an important part of it. And I'm wondering who you think Patterson should actually choose.
What was the last? Did you hear the next one?
Governor Patterson choose.
Do you want to answer that?
Me? No.
I'm a fan of Chris, of Cuomo. I think he's done a terrific job, and I'd like to see him.
You mean Andrew Cuomo?
Yeah, Andrew Cuomo. I'm sorry, Chris Cuomo is a newscaster who's a friend of mine, but and he's a nice guy, but he wouldn't be a good senator, I don't think. But yeah, his brother would be I think will be a terrific senator.
Caroline Maloney,
Yeah.
good choice.
Yeah.
I'm sorry that Caroline is leaving the field,
Yeah,
actually.
I was too.
I'm a great fan of hers. I think she's very smart, and I think that people did not understand that having to protect herself for so many years from the onslaught of people made for a kind of withdrawal. And what is wrong with a woman spending 15 years raising her kids?
That's right.
I think that's extremely sexist.
Oh, I don't think that was it. Come on, everything isn't sexist.
Well, I think that people criticized her for wanting to be a stay-at-home mother.
I don't think that's what they were criticizing.
What do you think it was?
I think that one of the effects of Obama, this was a bad year to be entitled to a Senate seat. We had a president who had come from nowhere, who wasn't related to anyone, who beat people who were related to people, and succeeded a person who was related to someone, and nobody was in the mood for that, and then they rolled her out, and it wasn't good. That was not a good thing. I happen to think she would have made a perfectly good senator had she wanted to be a senator. I tend to think that all this going around to the Bronx and meeting people in Democratic state politics may have been one of the reasons why she does not want to be a senator. But we will never know why, because we never really find out the truth about these things.
But do you think...
I hope you're not driving north after this.
Do you think that being rich because you've lost every single one of your relatives is an easy road for a person?
I'm not getting into that.
But to get back to the question...
I'm not getting into that.
To get back to the question...
You're getting into that. I'm not.
Hey, I think that we should have a say. I live in New York. I grew up in New York, and I know it's not how it works, but I'm kind of pissed off that we don't have a say in who's going to be our senator.
Yes.
If Governor Patterson, let's have a poll. Let's see who it is. I think there are a lot of people that we probably don't know about who might make viable candidates.
I thought they should make Tom Brokaw the interim senator, just the way they made him the interim Tim Russert, and he could do it till the special election.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Hello. One of your writers is Jeff Stone, who's a University of Chicago law professor, and he's a good friend of mine, and I just want to tell you this great quick story. Go back about 20-some years ago when there was a buzz going around the country's law schools about this law review president at Harvard. And it was
Can you
Jeff.
speak a little closer to the microphone?
I'm sorry, did you hear that?
Yeah.
And it was Jeff who went to Harvard and plucked him and brought him to Chicago to teach at the law school. And then from there, he went on to community organizing, etc. But he was making a buzz way back then. And then we saw him at the Democratic Convention with his keynote address, and now we get to celebrate.
We actually should be thanking John Kerry, too, because who knows what would have happened had he not given him the chance to speak at that convention, which was the beginning of this.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Good evening. What do you think will or should be the posture of the netroots and other progressive activists towards the Obama administration? Patiently supportive, somewhat gently agitating, protesting, trying to push them further to the left. What do you predict, and what do you predict, and what do you think should be the posture?
Well, I actually think that the way of continuing to look at American politics through this right-left prism is completely obsolete. I regularly urge our reporters to avoid this terminology in their pieces because it really restricts our understanding of what's happening. The country has shifted. The center has shifted. So we have 60 to 70% majorities around issues and positions that used to be considered left-wing, bringing our troops home. Unless you want to believe that over 60% of Americans are suddenly on the left, this is not a left-wing position. Some form of health care for everyone. 70% of Americans want that. Have 70% of Americans become left? No. Corporate responsibility? Probably 90% of Americans. So these are or global warming, another thing. So these are positions that are now the new center. And in a sense, Barack Obama is defining the new center. And the netroots are really going to, I'm sure there are going to be many, many different reactions. There isn't sort of a unified netroots meeting that determines what they're going to do. But I think what is important is to just look at each decision on its own terms and not to look at it through that prism of right-left.
I think that's a great, I totally agree.
Very good. It really troubled me that Barack Obama has not had a honeymoon. I mean, people have been criticizing him before he even was president. The criticism of him from the left before he came to power was absurd to me.
But mild.
I don't think it was always mild.
But the question is, does that serve strategic interests, though, for the left to be...
This isn't a honeymoon. What is it?
I mean, I don't know if I could talk to the left specifically, but I think we all have an obligation to keep him in check, and I think he wants that. I mean, there is, something we'd call in the military, the command climate has changed. The attitude throughout his organization has changed. It's so radically different from what we saw with Bush and Rumsfeld and others, and he wants to be challenged. And I think every one of us, netroots or otherwise, has an obligation to challenge him. I know my organization and others will be challenging him and pushing him forward, especially in the early days. We have to. And I think he welcomes that.
I think we need a combination of both challenge and support.
Yeah.
The deal is that we're not going to agree about everything, on the one hand. On another hand, it seems that only, if you try to change too much all at once, the system kind of breaks. So we have to keep a certain amount of pressure on, but not too much pressure. Things are getting better already. We don't want to screw it.
Well, I teach at Columbia, and out in front of the gates, there's always those Spartacus League guys with their newspapers and stuff, and they're still chanting and fighting something, and I just wonder, what do they really, the same guys from since I was an undergrad, what do they want to happen, and I think there's a difference. I think people who've been progressive and always on the outside and always fighting and yelling, because it was easy to yell and fight when there were just words, because you knew you're never going to get into, you're always going to be the opposition, and now suddenly it's like, look, now you're going to drive the car, you've got to really make a difference, and it goes back to what in the beginning, is it the politics of theater, or is it real politics? We really want to make something change. So if you say, what is your end goal? Your goal is this to happen. Then figure out how to make that happen, as opposed to just making yourself feel good by screaming and yelling, which I think has been a part of progressive politics.
And I think the progressives have a huge challenge. Everybody's been pushing so hard against that door, and now it's open. Everybody's trying to rush through at the same time. And there's a real, legislative challenge. Every time he decides to focus on something, everyone else says, well, what about me? There has to be some level of coordination so that we can get something done. I think you see that, that pragmatism from the younger generation, especially. They're not in Union Square protesting. They're organizing on the internet, they're blogging, they're finding other ways to have an influence on the system.
We unfortunately only have 5 minutes left, so here's what we're going to do. Can we just go through your questions quickly, like maybe 2 at a time, and then one of us will answer it instead of everybody?
Ready, go.
You spoke earlier about the mainstream media kind of falling down on the job in covering the economic crisis, and I wondered what you thought of traditional media's future. I see the newspapers fading away, and I wonder what's going to happen. What do you think?
Well, I actually think that the newspapers that are going to thrive will be the ones that find a way to integrate an online strategy with their print strategy. I spoke this afternoon to all the editors of the Hearst magazines around the world, not just the country. And it was really interesting to see how many of them are actually following really impressive online strategies. So there's this moment right now when there's a lot of pessimism about mainstream media and newspapers, but I think there will be a lot of survivors and a lot of them who get it right. And the ones who don't, the ones who don't understand there has to be a thriving online strategy will not. But I see a convergence more than a distraction of all print media.
My question's actually related. You've done such a delicious job of bringing the journalist back into journalism. I'm wondering how you're working to bring the same kind of point of view into the video on Huffington Post.
Well, video is actually something that we're going to be doing a lot more of in the months ahead. We're already integrating a lot more video from other sources, and as you know, not just on the Huffington Post, but everywhere, more and more people are watching Saturday Night Live on different media, whether it's YouTube or the Huffington Post, rather than on Saturday Night Live. So that is the future. So we're going to be doing.
My question is actually about point of view, because you've really demonstrated that point of view communicates so effectively, and there's a perception that video is a truth in and of itself, and we know from the traditional media that video can be skewed as well as print media.
Well, one of the things that we're also doing is reaching out to our citizen journalists. We have about 12,000 contributors on our off-the-bus list, and asking them also to videotape what's happening, as they did, I don't know if you saw it on the Huffington Post, Obama's train journey to Washington. And that was simply a documentary of the day, but there are many other video forms that can actually make news. So if there's any video that you want to post, send it along.
Thank you.
One of the things I found so fascinating about this election was the Obama campaign's brilliant efforts in harnessing technology and media and the internet and furthering their campaign efforts. So I'm curious as to hear your thoughts about the new administration's policies on technology, the advent of a CTO, and their emphasis on sort of using internet to further their messages, how that's going to affect you as members of the media.
Right? You understand that? It was about
in terms of the media and the use, the use by the White House of the technology, there's a lot of ways to get the word out better to people, to get people behind something and all that. There's a long story there, but I won't go into that one. The effect it may have on the media is that with the president, in a way, speaking directly to all of us, that means there's less opportunity for the media to be there as a filter, and that will change the role of the media, particularly the White House press corps regarding this. How that's going to evolve, I have to leave that question to the professionals. I'm a dilettante in the matter. But it's going to be changing things. The part I'm most concerned with is then how do we as individuals talk back to the president? And that's a long story in itself there, but he seems to be listening, and there are folks working on the mechanisms by which we can all speak and then together work together to figure out what the president should hear.
Oh, yes, sorry. Yeah.
Hi. As people who look at video footage and photographs all the time of the election, can you tell me what you felt was had the most powerful effect on the election results? Like, was there an image or a small video clip that you think was particularly influenced election results?
I think the tide of history turned in Obama's favor when we started to have all these bank and brokerage house failures, and things got really serious. There was a moment there last fall when he wasn't doing so well, and this militates against the notion that you can control things with images. There were real events in our society that made people reconsider who should be leading them.
I think the will.i.am videos also was something that really touched people in a way that was surprising, and I didn't know until you told me that he just did it himself. will.i.am just took it upon himself to have this video made, and then it became this anthem.
I think it was viral video in general. It was the will.i.am video. It was Obama's speeches being forwarded. It was Sarah Palin flubbing an interview. It was Saturday Night Live. I mean, viral video. I mean, we all saw it within days. And I think that really tipped the election a number of times in his direction. He always seemed to have a better handle on it. He always seemed to be ahead of the technology and ahead of the next flub in a way that the other side wasn't.
Tina Fey was definitely a part.
But also
and the great schlep, Sarah Silverman was fantastic.
But also,
Miami,
I think, interestingly enough,
to the grandparents, right.
Interestingly enough, his speech in Philadelphia on race, which was over 30 minutes, has been viewed in its entirety, was viewed before the election by over 6 million people.
Wow.
And I think that definitely had an impact when the fear-mongering began, when they tried to present him as another Reverend Wright, as a dark, angry black man. It was difficult to believe that if you had actually seen the speech.
And the week that McCain
Can we speak about the economy for just a moment?
completely nutty and canceled his campaign and flew to Washington and did nothing, or when it canceled the debate. I mean, that was a wacky moment.
I think especially when he canceled David Letterman. I think canceling David Letterman was...
But Jon Stewart mocking it was on video.
The economy. All this money's been lost. By who? By individuals, including me. The fact of the matter is that they were sort of phantom dollars because nobody lit a big bonfire and burned up all the $100 bills in this country. What we've got is a petrification, I like to call it, of the money flow. The banks can lend a large multiple of their assets. We give a bank $80 billion and they can do, up to 16 times they can lend that money. But they don't, they sit on it. So that's $1 trillion nearly that these bozos are keeping out of circulation. FDR cured the Depression over great opposition to the point where he tried to load the Supreme Court to get his programs through, and that failed. But he did it by one thing. He created the circulation of money. It doesn't matter about the amount of money. If it circulates, you can take the same $100 and have a reason to hand it to the guy on the right or the lady on the right, and it goes around there, and there's 6 people satisfied at that table and have made $100.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks. That's all. Let's get it unpetrified.
We're going to circulate the microphone to the next question.
Okay, so what we're going to do now, since there are 3 people standing there, would you mind just asking your question, each one of you, and if you can make it a question rather than a statement, and then we'll answer them all at once.
Well, actually, I came all the way from Ohio just to say thank you, and that's not really a question. I live in a community that hasn't elected a single Democrat in 100 years.
A single one.
And the last 8 years have been so frustrating. But connecting to the Huffington Post and meeting people like all of you and hearing your ideas let me know that I was not insane. They were. And on top of that, as I wrote and wrote and wrote, your editors took me on as a contributing writer, and so I drove here from Ohio to say thanks.
Oh, thank you so much.
My question is, I was hoping you could talk a little bit more about the future of culture. I'm a young Broadway producer, and you can read the New York Times now, and you can see what's happening here in New York with our Broadway community. Specifically, you talk about service, and I went into the theater because to me that's servicing the arts and culture, and that's what we need to keep going. And I'm very curious about, with all these regional theaters closing, with investors pulling their money back, where do you, who are artists yourself, see us getting that jump start to keep going?
Thank you. And your question?
I just wanted to ask if, I guess to Ms. Ephron most specifically, if you think it's the responsibility of the film and television industry to depict reality, especially, or I know you depict reality, but
Well, you're asking the wrong person.
No, I mean, but just, I know this is pretty trivial, but even in watching Gossip Girl, I mean, these are things that people my age actually look up to, unfortunately, and I mean, we're in an economic crisis, and how can you, even these people had October, even the Blair Waldorfs and the Serena Vanderwoodsons had October, so is it the responsibility of the entertainment industry to depict these things realistically? I mean, the only thing I've seen in recent years that has really affected me, well, I don't know, on a social standpoint is like a movie like Stop Loss, which was unbelievable and which really, really not hit home, but sort of opened my eyes a lot, and I just feel like, I don't know, that's my question.
I don't know. I mean, some movies reflect things, and television, I don't even know what to say. I mean, I think that if you don't want to watch it, there are other things to watch. And there are a lot of choices now. It is amazing to me that I have 200 channels and I never want to watch anything except Turner Movie Classics. But I mean, I think that there are things that are very realistic in the culture. You can see plays that are very, very realistic right now, still managing to survive somehow. But this thing that, I just don't know that the entertainment culture is a leader as much as it is a feeder of whatever is out there. And it reminds me of when they talk about how you shouldn't have anyone smoking in a movie, even if they're like a drug addict. They're not supposed to smoke. And I just think each individual artist does what they want, and if you build it and they come, you've done something that's feeding an appetite for it. So I don't think this thing where we're saying, oh, you should really be whatever. I think people should write what they feel like writing, and people should make it if they feel like making it, and if people come see it, fine. But I'm just ashamed that I said any of that. Trey,
well, in terms of theater, I wrote a play last year for the Lincoln Center Institute, and that goes to middle schools and high schools all over the city. And then I look at other plays, on Broadway where people are spending $100 to watch Young Frankenstein or more. I think that's not going to survive any kind of depression because it's silly. It's that kind of money, especially for someone who writes films as well. I can't imagine that anything is worth that much money for such a short amount of time, unless they give you like an $80 bracelet or something with the theater. So I think theater's got to come to grips with reality.
Yeah. And I think it does help that you've got a president who is a writer who seems focused on the arts and culture and music. I mean, even the fact that there's a conversation about possibly creating a Secretary of the Arts. I mean, I think that's a good thing. But if you're looking for reality in Hollywood, you're kind of looking for the wrong thing in the wrong place. I mean, there is the rise of the amateur documentary filmmaker, and I think in my world, Iraq, there have been some really powerful documentaries like the War Tapes and others that have come out, and that is, reality is pretty damn entertaining too. And I think that the internet provides people with the opportunity to convey and communicate that reality.
But there is a real question of where do young artists get supported? Right. Not by publishing companies, not by movie companies, not by the government, so where? And I'm asking that question. I would like to see there be a place for young artists to be nurtured, even if it's another WPA.
But that's what's been so great about the democratization of technologies, that because of blogging and a video camera that 5 years ago would cost $6,000, you can get a professional grade one for, a couple $100, and I mean not professional grade, but make a good movie with nothing. You look at a
for
movie
$5
like,
in Circuit City now.
like once.
Right. Yes.
Our new president seems to be advocating a return to some kind of Roman idea of civic virtue. I've been fascinated over the last couple of weeks because I don't know if all of you are aware, but so far the only suicide linked to the Maddow scandal was a titled Frenchman, an aristocratic Frenchman. And I can understand that, being French myself, because in their code of honor, faced with the disgrace of having lost his investors' money, he saw no other course but to commit suicide. Similarly, I don't know if you're all aware again, but this billionaire, Merkel, the German billionaire, again committed suicide without a whiff of scandal surrounding him. And yet, Bernie Maddow sits in his penthouse.
Madoff. Maddow's different.
Maddow,
person.
sorry.
Depends on my friend Rachel. I got to correct you on that.
Okay, thank you. Sits in his penthouse, apparently oblivious to the fact that he does have this option. And I'd like to ask the panel whether they think this is an American virtue or an American failing. Is it because we have a second act in American lives?
Thank you. We'll take this as a rhetorical question.
Yes. Great. Definitely not good for the Jews.
Yes.
Oh, I don't have a question. I just wanted to get a closer look at you. Please indulge me. I've had an ongoing fantasy. We all, I can say, probably revere and love Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King was inspired by Gandhi. I'm a Gandhi-phile. Imagine, roll back the tape to the build-up, to 9/11. Had someone like Obama, who I love too, his teeth. His lips.
This is going to be interesting.
But imagine, okay, because Gandhi used civil disobedience, non-cooperation.
We are going to start.
Okay, I can wind it up.
So let's make it really quick.
To be a transformational president, imagine if a president had said, despite this despicable act on 9/11, we are going to choose as a nation not to respond in kind, because you all know we have the firepower to obliterate you. However, we're not going to indulge in an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind.
I would say the problem was not responding in kind. The problem was going after those who had not attacked us on 9/11.
Well, that too.
After those who did.
Of course.
Thank you so much. We have.
All right, I'm young. I just started doing my research, and
Can you speak closer to the microphone?
I just started doing my research, and I'm trying to speak out to the people. Okay, all right. I found out the only time the United States didn't have that was in 1835 when Andrew Jackson was president, and how he accomplished this was he shut down the central bank. All right. Thank you. Now, if I was to read a quote from him, he says, "The bold efforts the present bank has made to control the government are but promotions of the fate that awaits the American people should they be deluded into a perpetuation, if I said that right, of this institution or the establishment of another like it." Now, I went on to do some research back when Ecuador in 1968 decided to start taking loans from the United States Bank. From 1968 to 1998, the poverty went from 50% to 70%. The unemployment went from 15% to 70%. Public debt went from 240 million to 16 billion. Resources for the poor, it just goes on and on. So I want the American people to not be quiet and to be able to question. Like, I agree, we should support Barack Obama, but if there's something that we doubt, we should be able to question instead of being quiet and hushed and pushed out of rooms and microphones turned off. You understand? I want the people to do their research and for these sites not to be taken down, or for these people who want to speak out not to be killed. You understand?
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
Under the heading of fear of business as usual, no plagiarism intended, Erica, and because I feel that I, at least, and many of us here, are part of the walking wounded of the past 8 years, the Geithner issue bothered me because it felt like, oh no, business as usual. They're going to allow him his mistakes, whatever they are. Do you think that we're ever going to know what those mistakes are? And might they come out in the committee hearings? Or wouldn't it have been better if we did know that, so that it wouldn't come to my mind and perhaps many others as, oh no, is this business as usual?
Thank you so much. Let us take the last question. And then, this is the last question.
My
and
question,
then we'll answer them together.
okay.
Yes.
My question is for the gentleman from the Veterans Organization. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on Obama's proposed escalation, if that's even the right word, of the war in Afghanistan.
So why
That's
don't
the
you
last
give
question?
Paul? Why don't you have the last word and
Solve the war,
answer
Paul.
both questions?
I think the core of it is that this country has gotten into the false idea that troops are the solution to everything. Like it's some kind of antidote to violence. And I think we just need to look beyond that. So the quick answer to your question is throwing troops in there without any other complementation is not alone going to be the silver bullet. It has to be bolstered by diplomacy, by microfinance, by political investment, and I think we've got to get our heads as a country away from thinking that troops are the answer to everything. And one of the biggest advocates for that is always going to be the veterans, but also Secretary Gates, who's pushing for expanded funding of the State Department. You're seeing people from the military pushing for that level of understanding too. So I hope that we have a national discussion about what's happening in Afghanistan, because I feel like we're not. I feel like it's kind of sliding under the radar. And we can learn a lot of lessons from Iraq, but only if we have a real national dialogue about it.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you all for being here. Thank you to the panelists.
Good to meet you.
That was great.
And if Naomi Lerner could find me afterwards, she's won a copy of the book this evening.